Picture this. You wake up in your comfortable bed, stumble into your bathroom, and without even thinking about it, you turn on the hot water. Steam fills the air. You grab your favorite soap, step under the shower, and 5 minutes later, you're clean, refreshed, and ready to face the day. Now, I want you to hold on to that feeling. That simple, ordinary morning routine that we take completely for granted. Because what I'm about to tell you will make you appreciate every single flush of your toilet, every hot shower, and every stick of deodorant you've ever used. Today, we're traveling back in time to explore what life was really like for the women who supposedly had it all. The queens, the duchesses, the ladies of the court who wore the finest silks, the most expensive jewels, and lived in palaces that would make modern billionaires jealous. But here's the twist nobody tells you about. Behind those diamond tiaras and silk gowns was a reality so disgusting, so shocking, that it would make a modern person physically ill. I'm talking about hygiene practices that would get you kicked out of any public space today. So grab a cup of coffee, maybe light a nice candle, and let's dive into 5 shocking truths about palace life that history books conveniently forget to mention. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at historical dramas the same way again. Let's start with something that seems absolutely insane to us today. The fear of water. Not drowning, not floods. I'm talking about the basic act of taking a bath. Here's what you need to understand. Back in the 1600s and 1700s, the smartest doctors in Europe, the ones advising kings and queens, genuinely believed that bathing was dangerous. Not just unnecessary, dangerous. Their logic went something like this. Your skin is your body's armor. It protects you from evil spirits, bad air, and diseases. When you open your pores with warm water, you're basically opening windows in a fortress, inviting all the bad stuff to come right in. And it wasn't just the doctors. The church was even more intense about it. Religious leaders preached that bathhouses were dens of sin, places where people went to indulge in vanity and temptation. Taking care of your body became associated with being vain, selfish, and morally corrupt. So what did royal women do instead? They got creative. And by creative, I mean gross. Most would use a cloth dampened with vinegar, alcohol, or even their own saliva to wipe down their hands, face, and neck. That was it. That was the bath. When they did actually bathe, which might happen a few times a year, it was a whole production. The entire family would share the same tub of water, with the men going first, of course. By the time it was a woman's turn, she was basically washing herself in other people's dirt soup. Here's the kicker. These were the women who were supposed to represent the pinnacle of beauty and grace. Imagine being expected to look flawless while your last real bath was 3 months ago. The irony is almost painful. Okay, now let's talk about something even more uncomfortable. Bathrooms. Or rather, the complete lack of them. Imagine you're visiting the most famous palace in Europe. Hundreds of rooms, thousands of guests, artwork worth millions, and gold everywhere you look. Now imagine there are maybe 10 actual toilets in the entire building for hundreds of people. What do you do when nature calls? Well, you had a few options, and none of them were good. Option 1. The chamber pot. This was basically a fancy bowl that you kept under your bed or behind a curtain. You'd do your business, and then either you or a servant would dump it out the nearest window. Yes, you heard that right. Out the window, into the street below. There are actual historical records of diplomats and nobles getting hit by waste from above. Can you imagine? You're walking to an important meeting, dressed in your finest clothes, and suddenly, well, let's just say your day is ruined. Option 2. The palace grounds. Men would simply step out onto a balcony or into the garden and let loose. Women had it harder because of their elaborate dresses, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The result? The palace smelled terrible. Foreign visitors would write in their diaries about the overwhelming stench. One German diplomat wrote that the corridors of the palace were so foul that he had to hold a perfumed handkerchief to his face just to walk through them. And here's something that really puts it in perspective. In 1715, a royal decree was issued stating that the palace hallways should be cleaned once a week. Once a week. And this was considered progress. They literally had to make a law to clean up human waste once every 7 days. Let that sink in the next time you complain about cleaning your bathroom. Now, let's talk about something that perfectly captures the insanity of palace life: the hair. If you've ever seen portraits from this era, you know what I'm talking about. These weren't just hairstyles. These were architectural monuments built on top of women's heads. We're talking structures that could be 2 or 3 feet tall, decorated with flowers, ribbons, jewels, and sometimes even miniature models of ships or gardens. To achieve this, women would use wire frames, padding made from wool or horsehair, and then their own hair would be styled around and through this structure. To keep everything in place, they'd apply thick layers of pomade made from animal fat, usually beef or pork lard. Now, here's where it gets really bad. These hairstyles took hours to create, sometimes an entire day. And once they were done, women couldn't wash them. They couldn't take them down. They had to sleep sitting up or with their necks on special blocks to avoid ruining the style. Can you guess what happened? Lice. Lots and lots of lice. These hairstyles became perfect breeding grounds for parasites. The warm, greasy environment was like a 5-star hotel for bugs. The ladies of the court knew this. They accepted it as part of life. They even had special tools called scratching sticks or head scratchers, long ornate rods that they could slip into their hair to scratch their scalps without messing up their style. Picture this. You're at an elegant dinner party, sipping wine, discussing philosophy, and casually scratching the lice out of your hair with a silver stick. That was normal. But women couldn't opt out of this torture because in palace society, your appearance was your currency. If you didn't keep up with the trends, you lost status, invitations, and influence. So they endured the weight, the pain, the itching, and the bugs, all in the name of fashion. Some of these wigs were so heavy they caused chronic neck problems. Others caught fire from getting too close to candles. But the show had to go on because in this world, how you looked mattered more than how you felt. You'd think that with all their wealth and power, at least the food would be good, right? Well, hold on to your stomach, because this part is particularly nasty. The kitchens in these grand palaces had a serious problem. The plumbing was terrible. And when I say terrible, I mean that sewage would sometimes back up into the food preparation areas. There are documented cases of wastewater flooding into the kitchens where meals for the queen were being prepared. Without refrigeration, proper ventilation, or good sanitation, the palace kitchens were breeding grounds for contamination. Meat would spoil quickly in the summer. Vegetables would sit out for days. Pests roamed freely. And yet, the cooks had no choice but to keep serving food to the most important people in the country. The consequences were brutal. Stomach problems were so common they were just accepted as part of life. Diarrhea, vomiting, and food poisoning were regular occurrences at court. But worse than that were the parasites. Tapeworms were incredibly common among nobles. These parasites could grow to several feet long inside your intestines. Even the king himself wasn't immune. Historical records show that King Louis XIV once passed a tapeworm that was 6 inches long. Think about that. The most powerful man in Europe, living in the most luxurious palace ever built, and he's got a parasite living inside him because the kitchen hygiene was so bad. For the women of the court, mealtimes were a performance. They had to eat gracefully, smile, make conversation, and appear delicate and refined, all while potentially battling nausea, cramps, or worse. They couldn't show discomfort. They couldn't complain. They just had to suffer in silence and maintain the illusion of perfection. This is what gets me about palace life. Everything was about appearances. It didn't matter if you were actually healthy, comfortable, or safe. What mattered was that you looked the part. And that pressure, that constant need to pretend everything was fine while your body was literally fighting off parasites, must have been exhausting. And now, we come to what might be the most shocking and heartbreaking part of palace life: childbirth. In modern times, giving birth is considered one of the most private, intimate moments in a woman's life. You have your partner, maybe a doctor or midwife, and that's it. But for royal women, childbirth was a public spectacle. When a queen went into labor, it wasn't just her medical team in the room. It was dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Nobles, courtiers, government officials, priests, foreign ambassadors. They would pack into the birthing chamber like they were attending a theater performance. Why? Because royal births had to be witnessed to prevent fraud. There were real fears that a baby could be switched, that a stillborn might be replaced with a healthy child, or that a girl might be swapped for a boy. So everything had to happen in full view of witnesses. Imagine the reality of this. You're in labor, experiencing the most intense pain of your life, and you're surrounded by strangers watching your every move. There's no privacy, no dignity, no chance to show weakness or fear. You're expected to endure it all with grace, while dozens of eyes are locked on you. Historical records tell us that women would faint from the stress and heat. The rooms were often so packed and stuffy that mothers would lose consciousness after delivery. One queen famously passed out because the room was so overcrowded and poorly ventilated. And this doesn't even touch on the medical dangers. Without antibiotics, sterile equipment, or modern medical knowledge, childbirth was incredibly risky. Many babies died within their first few years. Many mothers died from infections caused by dirty hands and unsanitary conditions. So while the birth of a royal heir was celebrated as a national triumph, for the mother, it was often a traumatic, dangerous experience that she had to endure in front of an audience. This is what really breaks my heart about these stories. These women were human beings with fears, pain, and emotions, but they were treated like vessels, like public property. Their bodies weren't their own. Their private moments weren't private. They existed to serve a purpose, and their personal suffering didn't matter as long as they fulfilled their duty. So there you have it. 5 shocking truths about palace life that completely shatter the fairy tale we've been sold. These women lived in gold-covered prisons. They wore the finest clothes, but couldn't take them off to bathe. They ate at the fanciest tables but got parasites from contaminated food. They styled their hair into works of art, but couldn't escape the lice. They gave birth to the future of nations but had to do it in front of a crowd. Here's what strikes me most about all of this. We often look back at history and think, I wish I could live in that time. Everything seems so elegant, so romantic, so grand. But the truth is, Life for these royal women was anything but a fairy tale. Behind the diamonds and silk was discomfort, disease, and a complete lack of basic human dignity. This makes me think about how we judge success and happiness today. We see people living in mansions, wearing designer clothes, and we think they must have it all. But do they? Are they comfortable? Are they healthy? Are they free to just be themselves without constantly performing for others? The lesson here isn't just about history. It's about remembering that appearances can be deceiving, that wealth and status don't automatically equal quality of life, and that sometimes the simplest things, like a hot shower, a clean bathroom, and the privacy to exist without being watched, are the greatest luxuries of all. So tonight, when you brush your teeth, take your shower, and crawl into your clean bed, take a moment to appreciate it. Because throughout most of history, even queens didn't have what you have right now. Thanks for watching, and remember, history isn't always pretty, but it's always worth learning from.